On this video, I would like to review the Old Testament around 12 periods, outlining them of Old Testament history using round numbers. We begin in the first period with what we might call the pre-patriarchal history. And I've thought about it from 5,000 plus to 2100 BC. And in that period, we have Genesis 1 to 11, which would be the beginnings. We have creation in chapter 1 and 2, the fall, chapters 3 to 5, the flood, chapters 6 through 9, and the Tower of Babel, chapters 10 and 11. The second period is the patriarchal period from approximately 2100 to 1840 BC. In this period, we have Genesis 12 to 50, and the main theme is God's covenant with Abraham. We see Abraham in Genesis 12 to 25, Isaac in 26, Jacob in 27 to 36, and Joseph and his narrative in 37 to 50. The third period is the period of Israel in Egypt from 1840 to 1440 BC. We have the Exodus, chapters 1 to 12 of the book of Exodus. Here we have the call of Moses, the plagues, and the Passover. The fourth period is the period of Exodus and wilderness wanderings, approximately 1440 to 1400 BC, including Exodus 12 to Deuteronomy. First, we have Exodus 12 to 40, which deals with the Exodus, the Ten Commandments, and the law, followed by the tabernacle. Then we have Leviticus, which is mainly a book of worship that the priests would follow. We have Numbers. Next, number 3, wilderness wandering. And then this is followed by the book of Deuteronomy, what I might call the suzerainty treaty. God makes a treaty, and we see it carried out. This is what I've done for you, and this is what I want from you. If you do what I do, here are the blessings. If you do not, here are the cursings. The fifth period is the period of entrance into Canaan, 1400 to 1380 BC. Here we have Joshua and his entrance into the land of Canaan, the book of Joshua, and the entrance, I should say, of Israel into the land of Canaan. Then the sixth period is the period of the Judges, 1380 approximately to 1050 BC. In this period, we have the Judges, and the period of the Judges showing a period of apostasy. We have 1 Samuel 1 to 7, Samuel being the last of the Judges, and then finally we have Ruth during that period as the kinsman redeemer. This is followed by the seventh period, the period of the United Kingdom, 1050 to 931 BC. Here we have Saul, 1 Samuel 7 to 31, about 1050 to 1010 BC, and we see his failure as a king. Then we have David in 2 Samuel and the Psalms, many of the Psalms by David, 1010 to 970 BC. David is a good king with failures. We also see in this period the great Davidic covenant of 2 Samuel 7, and then the Psalms, many of them by David, and this became Israel's hymn book. Then we have Solomon, 1 Kings 1 to 11 during this same seventh period, and here we have the date around 970 to 931 BC. Under Solomon, we have the Song of Songs, a litany of marriage songs, followed by the Proverbs, a wisdom maxims that are taught, and finally Ecclesiastes, with the theme Vanity of Vanities, Havel Havalim, Amar HaKohalet. Then we have the 8th period, the period of the Davidic kingdom, 931 to 722 BC. We have the Assyrian captivity in 722 BC. And in terms of the prophets that were ministering during that period, that being the background, we had Jaim, Joel, which I've called the locust book, dealing with the locust plagues, and the background would be 2 Kings 12. Then we have Jonah, the prophet of God's great grace, and how God taught Jonah a lesson, but brought grace to the Ninevites, 2 Kings 14. Then we have Amos during that same period, 931 to 722, which I've called the Cowboy Turned Preacher. It's a book about social justice. And then we have Hosea. We might entitle Hosea the Bad Marriage Book, the background being 2 Kings 14. And Hosea and his marriage becomes a representation of God and Israel. This is followed by Isaiah, whom I've called the Shakespeare of the Old Testament, in 2 Kings, the background being 15 to 18, followed then by Micah, and I've called Micah the little Isaiah, the same background in 2 Kings 15 to 18. Both of these prophets are very heavy in messianic texts. Then period number 9 is the period of the surviving kingdom, 722 to 536 BC. And during this period, we have the leading up to the Babylonian captivity. We have Nahum, the judgment on Nineveh, Zephaniah, who focuses thematically on the day of the Lord, Habakkuk, the just shall live by faith, a book, a quote that Paul uses in Romans 1. Jeremiah, during this period, the weeping prophet, along with Lamentations, weeping over Jerusalem. This becomes a type of Christ, who later weeps over Jerusalem. Then, number 10, we have the period of exile, 586 to 536 BC. During this, we have Daniel, the Gentile world powers that he deals with. That's his theme. Ezekiel is what I might call the apocalyptic prophet. He talks heavily about things in the future, and Gog and Magog, and the rebuilt temple, however one interprets that. But he's more of an apocalyptic prophet, I believe. And then Obadiah is the judgment on Edom. Then we have period number 11, the period of the restoration, 536 to 400 BC. And here we see the exiles returning under Zerubbabel, 536 BC, and Ezra 1 to 6. We then see the temple rebuilt from 520 to 516 BC. And in that period of restoration, we have Haggai, that I've called the exhorter. He's encouraging the people in the rebuilding of the temple. We have Zechariah, the visionist, who has many visions to encourage the people. Very, again, visionary with visions, encouraging them to get the job done. Esther is the great prophet on the providence of God. God's name is not mentioned, but we see his sovereignty and providence. 480 BC. Ezra then returns, and there's a revival from the reading of the law in 458 BC And we see the background for this in Ezra 7 to 10, or the fulfillment of Ezra's return and revival and what happened. Then we have Nehemiah's return for the building of the city of Jerusalem in 448 BC. This is followed then by Chronicles, which is the encouragement in the restored temple worship found in the Chronicles. Where Kings talks about the reason for going into captivity, Chronicles encourages restored temple worship. And then we have Malachi. I've called Malachi the question and answer prophet. How have we not loved you? And then he'll answer that. And how have we robbed you, Lord, in tithes and offerings and so forth. So he's the question and answer prophet about 430 BC. Then the 12th period is the Inter-testamental Period, 536 BC to 535 AD. We have the Persian period, 536 to 331 BC, the Grecian period, 331 to 327 BC, the Ptolemaic and Seleucid period, 323 to 63 BC, and finally, the Roman period, 63 to 135 AD. So those are the 12 periods that I think tie together the Old Testament. Pre-patriarchal, patriarchal, period of Israel in Egypt, period of Exodus and wilderness wandering, period of entrance into Canaan, period of the Judges, period of the United Kingdom, period of the divided kingdom, then the surviving kingdom, and then the period of exile and period of restoration, and finally the intertestamental period. So I wanted to just do a brief outline, summary outline of 12 periods that I believe tie together, in my mind, the Old Testament.